maybe we'll start if it's fine with you. Sorry. So colleagues, we are now officially launching this event. Excellencies, dear colleagues. Kind of sorry for the Geneva Environment Network has the pleasure to welcome you today at the International Environment House for an information sharing session on activities and events related to the environment taking place during the 54th session of the Human Rights Council, which will kick off next month in Geneva and will conclude mid-October. So for those who are not familiar with the environmental community in Geneva, I'm Diana Rizzolio, the coordinator of the Geneva Environment Network. We are a network of more than 100 institutions and secretariats based in Geneva, contributing to making this region one of the global hubs for environmental governance. Administrated by the United Nations Environment Programme and supported by Switzerland, we organize various networking activities, including regular multi-stakeholder roundtable and briefings on major environmental negotiations and trends. The environmental agenda in human rights bodies, particularly in Geneva, has increased in importance over the past few years. We have seen this in the growing number of reports by special rapporteurs and treaty bodies that tackle issues related to human rights and the environment. This can also be seen in engagement in interactive dialogues with member states, international organizations, human rights national institutions, and non-governmental organizations during the sessions. The link between environment and human rights cannot be ignored, even more after the important achievement last year at the General Assembly. So as such, for some years now, the Geneva Environment Network has published for each session of the Human Rights Council a webpage that summarizes the environmental agenda of the related session. The information collected on this page is compiled by our team, and actually it's Arve sitting there at the bottom who has the lead on that. The objective of today's information sharing session is to discuss and share information on planned environmental related activities at and around this upcoming session of the Human Rights Council, such as in-person and online events, publications or exhibitions, among others, and exchange on possible synergies. They will feed our page, which provides an updated calendar of these environmental related events. Inputs are welcome from all stakeholders. And as we move on with the session, you will also find on that page a lot of codes and other important information of what's happening at the Council. The link to the submission form, if you have preparing an event that is not yet flagged there, is being shared in the chat for who is online with us, but for who is in the room, it's also available on the screen. And before we start this event and our tour de table on the agenda of the upcoming session, I just want to mention for who is online that throughout the event, you can raise your questions by using the Q&A box. We have a dedicated session to answer these after the presentations. And of course, for who is in the room, we will start with you. So, and finally, I would also like to mention for who is online that the transcription is available at the bottom left of your screen, and have a look at the current slide, which shows where to access automated transcript in over 100 languages. So now let's start the discussions, and we have the pleasure to welcome here at the International Environment House Ben Schachter, who is leading the Human Rights and Environment team at the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. Ben, so let us know why it is important to have such information sharing sessions before each session of the Human Rights Council. Ben, the floor is yours.
There we go. Thank you very much, Diana, and welcome and good morning to everybody. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I'm joined by a number of my colleagues, so I'll try to be very brief, and they'll offer some updates on some of the specific work and engagement by special procedures mechanisms at the Council related to human rights and the environment. We really welcome and value these exchanges. This is, I'm not sure, Diana, maybe the fourth one or fifth one. It's a really useful new practice in terms of bringing together all of the different people, stakeholders working on human rights and the environment at the council. And helping us have a full and comprehensive picture of how the Human Rights Council is engaging on environmental issues, from the advisory committee to the special procedures mechanisms to the resolutions that are being negotiated to the side events and parallel activities that are happening. And what we find is that that is an increasing and growing area of focus for the council and related engagement, the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and rights-based environmental action, and that the work of the council intersects with and frequently influences environmental processes outside of the council, influences the way that advocates are working towards advancing rights-based environmental action at the national, regional, and international level. So these discussions really help us have a clear understanding of some of those interlinkages and of the whole picture of how the Human Rights Council is engaging on environmental issues. I wanted to say maybe a few words about some of those other processes outside of the council where human rights and the environment are being discussed. One of those roughly corresponded with or took place slightly before the last session of the council, and I'm not sure we had a chance to fully discuss it then, but the 58th meeting of the subsidiary bodies to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. There was a very important decision adopted on, concluding observations of the chair of the subsidiary body on implementation, adopted on access to intergovernmental meetings, which emphasized the importance of protecting civic space and protecting rights in the context of the organization of climate negotiations and related processes throughout the UNFCCC. And there was a real synergy there between that push in those negotiations and the discussion here at the council, where the EU led a joint statement by a large number of states, I think it was 70 plus ultimately, calling for exactly this, calling for protection of civic space in the context of the climate negotiations on an ongoing basis. So that's one example. The International Seabed Authority just had a meeting. One of the primary issues, or one of the important issues being discussed by the ISA, is the potential for deep seabed mining. And that issue wasn't really resolved. So there's draft regulations that are being worked on, and of course it's important that those regulations reflect human rights. There was also a call by some states for a moratorium on deep seabed mining altogether, and there remain a group of states who are interested in moving forward. So again, it's not a resolved issue, but an important one, and one that we will continue to follow. There's ongoing discussions in the Council of Europe about a potential new instrument on the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. There's the work of the Transitional Committee on Loss and Damage. There's the upcoming, and this will correspond with the Council, 5th meeting of the International Conference on Chemical Management. And the Committee on the Rights of the Child just adopted a general comment on the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. As I said, you'll hear updates from colleagues on the Council and upcoming reports, etc. So colleagues here from the toxics mandate, the water and sanitation mandate, the Special Rapporteur on Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I want to flag that there will be a panel on youth participation on 26 September, and the focus of that panel is youth participation in environmental matters. Again, nice linkage there with a lot of the discussions that are taking place, for example, in the plastics space about participation, and the climate space, which I already referenced. The High Commissioner will open that panel. and there will be 4 youth panelists from engaged in different processes: biodiversity, plastics, climate change. There will also be the launch of the Committee on the Rights of the Child General Comment on Right to a Healthy Environment, which is planned for the 18th of September. There is an advisory committee study on new technologies for climate protection, which is due to be submitted to the 54th session of the Council. And finally, the last thing I want to say before turning things over is this session of the Council and this whole year, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And part of that is a focus on environment and climate change, which has been identified as one of 4 key issues that'll be discussed during the high-level event taking place on December 12th for the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we will also have discussion and a whole spotlight month on environment and climate change in November. And all of the work, that's taken place across the 3 sessions of the Council this year, the 2 that have already happened and the 3rd that's upcoming, focusing on environment and climate change, will feed into and inform that process and that discussion as well, which is meant to help us identify the way forward with respect to implementing the right to a healthy environment and advancing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. And thank you, Ben, for mentioning some of the important processes in which the Office of the High Commissioner is engaging to bring the human rights angle. You also mentioned that we have invited those working with the various UN Special Rapporteurs with activities related to the environment that are presenting their reports at this session of the Council. And indeed, we will start a little round, and we'll start that little round with Noura Humud Al-Zaid, who is an associate expert at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And Noura is working with the Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights, Marcos Orellana. So Noor, let us hear from you what we can expect from Marcos at this session. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you everyone for being here today. I would first like to start by thanking the organizers for highlighting and harmonizing efforts related to environmental issues, especially today in the context of the upcoming Human Rights Council session. As Diana mentioned, my name is Noura Al-Zaid, and I'm an associate expert working at the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, and I'm supporting the mandate of the UN Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights. So perhaps I'll start by giving a brief introduction to the mandate. The mandate was first established in 1995 to examine the implications on human rights of hazardous substances and waste. It was then expanded in 2011 to include the whole life cycle of hazardous products. So that's from manufacturing to final disposal. And this meant that now the scope of the mandate includes things like extractive industries, oil, gas, and mining. It also includes labor conditions in agricultural and manufacturing sectors, and environmental emissions from all sources, disposal of waste, amongst other issues. And the mandate is set to be renewed this upcoming session. As I mentioned, the mandate holder is Mr. Marcos Orellana. He was appointed in 2020, and he is an expert in international law and the law on human rights and environment. In his work, Marcos, or the Special Rapporteur, found that the improper management of hazardous substances and the resulting environmental harm has an impact on a wide range of human rights, whether that is the right to life, the right to health, the right to a healthy environment, amongst other rights. And often these impacts are adverse health impacts like impairment to the heart or lungs, birth defects, amongst other issues. And in many cases, those who are most impacted are the people who are most vulnerable in our societies. So women, children, indigenous people, workers, the poor, amongst other groups. So for this reason, the Special Rapporteur works to encourage states to put their human rights obligations at the forefront of their considerations, whether that is in national policy making or in international environmental negotiations. And so maybe I'll give a few examples of the way that the Special Rapporteur has been doing so in recent years. Earlier this year at the BRS COPs, the Special Rapporteur, I think along with the Special Rapporteur on Water and Sanitation and the Special Rapporteur on Environment, urged states to adopt amendment and an addition of a new Annex 8 to the Rotterdam Convention. And the point of this proposal was to allow chemicals to be added to the new annex via a majority vote. And in this way, a greater number of states would benefit from the prior informed consent procedure and the consequent access to information. Another example is that the Special Rapporteur has been closely following the negotiations and the development of an internationally binding treaty on plastic pollution. And that is in light of the pressing need to curb the production and use of plastics, and also the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. In addition to his engagement with states, the Special Rapporteur also engages with businesses, and that is through communications or country visits on some occasions. And he encourages them or reminds them of their duty to respect human rights. And so in light of this, and in light of, in many cases, there is a huge toxic footprint of businesses in their supply chains, manufacturing processes, products or policies. So the Special Rapporteur has also been encouraging the initiative of elaborating an internationally and legally binding instrument that would keep businesses accountable for their extraterritorial obligations. So these are a couple of examples of engagement in environmental negotiations at the international level. But in addition to the country visits, the communications and statements, the Special Rapporteur also produces reports. And so in the upcoming Human Rights Council session, he will be presenting his thematic reports on the toxic impacts of some proposed climate change solutions. And in that report, he highlights the negative impact or the toxic burden of some climate change technologies on human health and the environment. So maybe I'll give a quick example of that. A lot of energy transition technologies nowadays require batteries, and these batteries often require minerals and, for example, lithium. And in many cases, the mining of these minerals would, contaminate the local environment and also impact the local communities negatively. So he will be speaking about similar patterns and risks, but also putting forward recommendations on detoxification and decarbonization strategies that are guided by human rights principles. So in addition to the thematic report, he will be presenting a couple of reports on his country visits. So one of the country visits was to Ghana, and it took place between 13 November and 13 December. And the other country visit is to Paraguay, which took place between October 3 and 14, 2022. And lastly, he will be presenting an additional report on his visit to the International Maritime Organization. And in that report, he highlights the impacts on human rights of the shipping industry, as well as he talking about the role of the IMO and encouraging it to explicitly embrace a human rights-based approach in its work. So I think in a nutshell, these are the topics that he will be covering, or the reports that he will be presenting in the upcoming Human Rights Council session. In terms of side events, the Special Rapporteur will be co-organizing the Toxics-Free Talks. But in terms of the details, I think I will leave it to Eve, maybe, to talk about that. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Noura, and indeed, Eve will speak later on this panel. We'll now move to another special rapporteur. We have with us Daniela Chavez Mendoza, who is working with the UN Special Rapporteur on the rights to water and sanitation, Pedro Arroyo Agudo. So Daniela, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you everyone for joining this session. Thank you, the organizers, for putting us together and highlighting the interlinkage between human rights and the environment. So my name is Daniela Chavez. I work with the Special Rapporteur on the human rights to water and sanitation. And very, very similar to what Noura just introduced, he will his mandate also is he also has to present several thematic reports and country visits. I will not go through the details of the mandate because Noura gave a very nice introduction. So I will delve a little bit into the reports that he will present to the council this session. And the thematic report that he will present is on fulfilling the human rights of those living in poverty and restoring the health of aquatic ecosystems to converging challenges. And for the Special Rapporteur, ensuring drinking water to the 2 billion people without guaranteed access to it, most of them are severely impoverished, and it's only possible if progress is made in restoring the good condition of the aquatic ecosystem that supply their water. So the report focuses on the problems of pollution, of overexploitation and mismanagement of rivers, lakes, wetlands, and other water bodies, and their impacts on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation. And in particular, it shows how toxic contamination of water by heavy metals and other contaminants breaks not only the rights to water, but also the rights to health and life of millions of people. Given the magnitude of the harm, the Special Rapporteur is trying to put forward a larger debate on what large pollutants can cause to not only the environment but human rights, and how can we better address this type of acts to prevent them, but also find remedies for people that are suffering from this large contamination. Added to this thematic report, the Special Rapporteur will also present his findings on his country visit to Peru, which places significant emphasis on water quality. And he will also present his findings on his report on his country visit to Tunisia, which revolves around issues related to water scarcity and climate change. His interactive dialogue at the Human Rights Council will take place on Thursday, September 14th at 15 hours, so 3 p.m. He will also hold 2 side events, but we are about to confirm the specific time and hour. One side event will be presenting the findings of the report of the thematic report. And the other side event is to be confirmed yet, but we'll focus more on minority trends, and probably we'll be holding it we will hold it with minority trends group. So I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And I met some days ago your colleague, Maria José Acosta, who is also assisting the Special Rapporteur. And she spoke to me a lot about the report, and it was very engaging. And I'm looking forward to follow the presentations at this session of the Council. And finally, we have also with us Lilia Petrosian, who is a human rights officer supporting the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples, Francisco Calitzai. And sitting next to Lilia is her colleague, Francisco Alfonso, who is also assisting the Special Rapporteur. Lilia, your Special Rapporteur is presenting a report that is relevant to the environmental community, so I will let you talk about that.
Thank you very much, and good morning, colleagues. Thank you to organizers for the invitation and this opportunity for me and my colleague Francisco to present the work of the Special Rapporteur on the rights of indigenous peoples. Environmental and climate change issues are the priority of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur. He attaches high importance to these issues and participates very actively in policymaking and advocacy initiatives at the international, regional, and national levels. He participates actively in events organized by UNEP, CBD Secretariat. This year, he aims to participate in COP28 as well. He also conducts bilateral meetings with various states, civil society, and indigenous peoples in order to advocate for the implementation of the international standards, particularly the rights of indigenous peoples, in line with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in the international environmental and climate change negotiations. Indigenous peoples have important knowledge systems developed over generations through their close relationship with nature, and this scientific and technical knowledge encompasses a deep understanding of ecosystems, plants, animals, and their interdependencies. For the Special Rapporteur, it is important to advocate for their rights because recognizing and integrating this knowledge into combating climate change, as well as environment and biodiversity conservation efforts, can significantly enhance the effectiveness and sustainability of such measures. In this regard, the Special Rapporteur particularly highlights and advocates for the important role played by indigenous women. Indigenous women are active change agents and play a key role in safeguarding ecosystems. The Special Rapporteur advocates for the implementation of global biodiversity framework. The latter, inter alia, promotes the equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of resources. And indigenous peoples' rights to fair and equitable sharing of these benefits are enshrined in international agreements such as Nagoya Protocol. The Special Rapporteur consistently engages with the main stakeholders to advocate for the recognition and upholding of indigenous peoples' rights, which he believes can foster strong partnerships and collaborations between the stakeholders, leading to more inclusive and mutually beneficial conservation outcomes. The Special Rapporteur also advocates for the efficient implementation of coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which requires respect and implementation of indigenous peoples' rights to self-determination, lands, territories, and resources. Their perspectives, knowledge, and experiences should be integrated into policy development, planning, and implementation at the national, regional, and international levels. The 26th Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 2021 acknowledged the important role of indigenous peoples and their scientific knowledge for mitigating the crisis of global climate change and biodiversity loss. This year, the Special Rapporteur aims to participate in COP28 to continue his advocacy in this regard. During the HRC 54, the Special Rapporteur presents his thematic report dedicated to green financing and the rights of indigenous peoples, with the aim to update and build on the findings of previous work conducted by the mandate on the topic of climate finance, international investment agreements, and protected areas, with a focus on the accountability of financial actors. His interactive dialogue is scheduled to take place on 28th of September, during which he will also introduce his country visit reports to Denmark and Greenland and Canada, both of which address issues relating to climate change and environment and their impact on the rights of indigenous peoples in these respective countries. His thematic report on green financing is critical. He considers that it is critical, green finance is critical to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the targets set by agreements under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Convention on Biological Diversity, coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The Special Rapporteur emphasizes that green financing has an important human rights dimension. As economic transition requires large amounts of financial flows, nature credit markets have been considered important tools to mobilize the financial resources needed to meet international environmental targets, such as the reduction in greenhouse gases and other conservation and green economy initiatives. The Special Rapporteur states that securing a just transition should be inclusive of respect for human rights and should address the social and environmental interventions and safeguards needed to protect the rights and livelihoods of indigenous peoples when economies shift to sustainable development practices. The report stresses that shift to green finance is necessary, but it should be in respect for indigenous peoples' rights because they are often impacted by green finance projects. He also advocates for direct funding to indigenous peoples in order to preserve their lands, knowledge, and distinct ways of life, and to create economic opportunities that may help them to maintain and strengthen their indigenous identity. States, international financial institutions, and the private sector play a critical role in shaping policy beyond their financial investments, and the Special Rapporteur recommends that they take steps to ensure that indigenous peoples are consulted, consent to, and meaningfully participate in the development and implementation of projects and programs that may affect their rights and interests. The Special Rapporteur provides a number of recommendations to achieve the above mentioned, and he encourages states and other stakeholders to give due consideration to the implementation of his recommendations. We hope that you will all find the report interesting and useful and will participate in the interactive dialogue that will take place 28th of September and provide your views and suggestions further to the report and the recommendations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lilia. And indeed, we have here and in this same building a lot of people working on green finance to whom we have raised that this report was also coming up. So there is certainly also an interest from other UN bodies in following up the discussion that will happen at the Council. So next, I will hand over the floor to Yves Lador, who is the representative of Earth Justice to the United Nations here in Geneva, who will discuss the upcoming Geneva Toxic-Free Talks. And just let me, this is already the third edition of those talks. And let me just mention that as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights reports every fall to the Council and to the UN General Assembly, the Geneva Toxic-Free Talks aim to harness this opportunity to reflect on the challenges posed by the production, use, and dissemination of toxics and how Geneva contributes to bringing together the actors working in reversing the toxic tide, which are also many of them based in this building. On the sidelines of this the full session of the Council, this year's Toxic-Free Talks will take place from 20 to 22 of September. 3 days of conferences and discussions celebrating the work of the mandate and organizations in the struggle to the right to live in a toxic-free environment. And some of the colleagues present here have mentioned some of the important negotiations taking place related to this topic this year or early next year. And we at the Geneva Environment Network have the pleasure to support the Special Rapporteur and Earth Justice and other actors in organizing these talks. With that, Yves, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Diana, and for the whole of the team of GEN for organizing this event. and to have it before the organizational session of the Council for the coming session on next Monday. And also before we have us as NGOs, the deadlines for requesting rooms for side events, which will be tomorrow morning. So it's pretty timely, and thank you very much. And helps a lot to try to have a general view of what is going to happen and to avoid to step on each other's toes, because it has happened previously that sometimes there's two big environmental discussions and they both happen at the same time, which is of course very unfortunate. So I hope we'll be able to avoid this. As you said, Diana, the September session it has a specific focus on toxics and human rights, because that's when the Special Rapporteur is presenting his reports. But it's interesting to note that as UNEP has defined the situation we are in as a triple planetary crisis, the Human Rights Council is one of the very few UN bodies, specialized bodies, that has one of these crises at each of its sessions. So the whole year cycle covers this issue. Biodiversity will be rather discussed at the March session. Climate change is definitely one of the big issue at the June session, and of course then toxics comes up in September. And at this session, it will be also quite important, as we will have the resolution which will renew and we hope just confirm for 3 more years the mandate, which is right now carried by Professor Marco Soriano. So the Geneva Toxic Free Talks had a particularly important edition last year, because it was a celebration of the 25 years of the mandate. It is definitely the oldest environmental mandate of the Human Rights Council, that it started at the time of the Commission on Human Rights. To be very honest, it was not exactly the 25 years, but unfortunately the 25 years was in the middle of the COVID period. So we took the time when we were able again to have these big events to celebrate these 25 years. And we hope to continue. There was a lot of requests to say, but we should continue these type of discussions. It is true that we don't have that many opportunities to bring all of the actors working on toxic and human rights together in the same room. And so we hope with these debates and these free talks to be able to do that. And once again, I'd like really to thank the Geneva Environment Network for being one of the co-organizers with the Special Rapporteur and with us on this. So I'll just very quickly go through the themes we're looking forward to talk about during these 3 days. Some of the dates are rather fixed, others are still being discussed, so I won't give more details in that so I don't make any mistake. But at least for the issues, I think we have now a clear view of what we're looking forward to talk about. We will start, and I think this is a rather fixed now event. We will start, of course, a focus on the report that has just been presented by Noura on detoxifying decarbonization. It's a huge challenge to make sure that we don't find a solution against a crisis by making it worse in another crisis. And that's why an approach about the 3 planetary crises is so important. We need to tackle all of the crises together and not aggravate pollutions when we want to reduce global warming because of fossil fuel emissions. So we're really very happy to, and we want to thank here Chile and the permanent mission representing Chile, because this will be organized with them. I don't know if the representative of Chile would like to say words afterwards, but we look forward to organizing this with them. They have quite a lot to say in their own national capacity on such an issue. They have developed a number of policies going in that direction. It is the same for a number of other countries. So we hope to have some of these good practice, we could say, in terms of national policies, demonstrate that. Another element which is also linked to the report which will be presented by the Special Rapporteur is his report on International Maritime Organization, the well-named IMO. The report is a visit report, so special procedures and special rapporteurs don't only do country visits, but they also do visits on organization. And it will be quite interesting to read this report, because it shows also the impact that international organizations can have in such a field. And it will probably also be an interesting window on the next report that the Special Rapporteur will be presenting in October to the UN General Assembly, which will be on the wider issue of shipping. Then, as it has been said by Diana and many of you around here around the room, and also for those who are following online, know that we will have a heavy chemical calendar until the end of the year, and definitely also at the beginning of next year. Coming up, actually at the same time, at the Human Rights Council will be the 5th International Conference on Chemical Management, where the Special Rapporteur will be playing a role. We will have also a meeting in Geneva of the 5th COP of the, I think it's the 5th, I hope I'm not making a mistake, of the Minamata Convention. And then there will be the negotiations going on the UNEP towards the plastic treaty, and also for the new science policy platforms on chemical and pollutions. So what we hope to discuss is how we can make human rights central in these chemical discussions. There is a line to be followed, and here states who are very active at the Human Rights Council should also devote some attention and energy and coordination efforts to make sure that what they are defending here in Geneva is also correctly reflected in the negotiations. Sometimes there are some discrepancies, and this is a bit unfortunate. And Ben Schachter, sitting next to me, is smiling at that because he has witnessed that in a number of negotiations. So we hope to have a discussion on that to make sure that all efforts are being coordinated, and there is a strong, as we had during the climate change negotiation with the Paris Agreement, that we do have a very strong inclusion, as strong as it was in the climate change, and perhaps even stronger would be better in this different negotiation process. Another issue which is very challenging, of course, is to make sure that greenwashing does not become basically the new policy, because it can be toxic for human rights. So we hope to have a discussion on that. And then we are looking also forward because the question of transition and looking for paths for these transitions are extremely important. And we're looking forward to be working with FIAN, Food International Action Network, on the question of transiting to agroecology, as well as with some of the trade unions to work on the just transition for workers. It's an issue now which is coming up, not just for climate change, but also in the field of chemicals. So that's an interesting concept and need. And we probably will have a contribution from the former Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights, Mr. Bashkut Tunçak. And then we also look forward to have a meeting with a number of academics and scientific. This will not happen in the Palais des Nations because they are not all accredited, and it will be easier to have it outside. But in order to have a strong participation of the scientific community in the discussions on the future science policy platform or panel on chemical and pollution. So very interesting 3 days to come. And we're very, very thankful to the Special Rapporteur to devote all this time and to contribute in the organization of these events. And I'd like also to thank the Special Rapporteur's team, Noura and Halida, because they're extremely precious in this work, and also for his own personal involvement in these discussions. So, and by the way, I should have said also before, I said I skipped one element in my notes. I mentioned FIAN. I'd like to say that we're also looking forward to work with the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung and the unions on the question of the workers, as well as CIEL, the Center for International Environmental Law, and IPEN, the International Pollutant Elimination Network, on the question of the different coming chemical conferences. So this, we hope really to have it as a collective work from the NGOs, from the academics, and from a number of countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yves. And before we start our tour de table, I still have a colleague who is joining us from Nairobi online. So-Yung Wang is in charge of human rights for the United Nations Environment Program. And she will soon speak, but just want to prepare your inputs or comments as we will start the tour de table as soon as So-Yung has finished. So I'm now going to move her to the stage and give her the floor. So-Yung, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Diana, and good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for having me in this very important meeting. And first of all, I want to also thank the Geneva Environment Network for organizing such an important information session each time before the Council. So I'm the legal officer at the United Nations Environment Program, and I think I actually know a lot of you there. So I'm connecting from Nairobi now, and I just wanted to have a brief brief remarks on the UNEP's engagement at the Human Rights Council and how we're working together with everyone. So one is so how we're engaging with the Human Rights Council and on the human rights work is through the operationalization of MOU with OHCHR. And this MOU is a quite comprehensive one, so it covers the High Commission's mandate and also the cooperation with the treaty bodies and the special procedures. So for instance, so Ben, as he briefed in the beginning, so we work closely on a lot of things that he mentioned about having meetings, integrating human rights issues into MEAs, and also like organizing meetings to raise awareness about Human Rights Council's work in outside Geneva. And also the treaty bodies, I think Ben and colleagues mentioned about the CRC's general comment. So UNEP served in the advisory board of the treaty of the CRC general comment, and then we contributed in the process, and we're very happy to also engage in that operationalization of the general comment. And with the special procedures, we worked with a number of the special rapporteurs, with all of you actually there at the podium today, water and sanitation, toxics, indigenous peoples, and also the environment and other mandate holders, as which is a very encouraging thing, because now we see a lot more mandate holders, and they're addressing all environment issues, toxics, chemicals, and the indigenous people's rights, water and sanitation, and the housing. So it's really encouraging for UNEP to actually like see many rapporteurs approaching to UNEP and to work together with the various issues. So other things that we do, like, so we organize the briefings and for states and other actors. And second is we also support CSOs, like civil society organizations working in environment and human rights issues. So working closely also with EVE and other organizations on this issue. And two other things that how we are working is one is connecting environmental issues and the human rights issues. So we're not trying to invent a new wheel, but it's really connecting. Like we see that this disconnect between the environment area and the human rights area in many occasions. It's gotten better, but we see still the gap there. So like with OHCHR and others, we're organizing side events and the meetings to make sure that the Human Rights Council's work is echoed in the chemicals discussions and the biodiversity discussions and other discussions, and also vice versa. So we are bringing also what's happening at the environmental negotiations and the MEA's multilateral environmental agreements into the council's work. And lastly, we also try to connect the different levels of work. So the policy level that's happening in Geneva and at the international level, but also at the regional level. There's a lot of things are happening, very encouraging news about the regions taking leadership on implementing the right to healthy environment in relation to many different areas, such as by protecting and promoting the activities of the environmental defenders, and also the clarifying the responsibilities of businesses in the implementation of the right to healthy environment. So we're trying to connect these different levels of work into one, and working closely with the OHCHR and other stakeholders at the regional level as well. And for instance, in September and October, we have full of regional meetings taking place in Asia Pacific and also in Latin American region on defenders, and also on the business activities and in relation to the right to healthy environment. So I will stop here and just to express UNEP's continued support for the Human Rights Council and all relevant stakeholders working on this issue. Thank you, Diana, and back to you.
Thank you very much, So-Young. So we'll now start our tour de table. And before starting, I also wanted to acknowledge here the presence of Matthias Pesch from the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, who hosted the secretariat of what we call the GECO, the Geneva Climate Change Consultations Group, with whom we have launched these information sessions. we co-organize information sessions jointly ahead of the June session of the Human Rights Council, because that's where climate change is more present. But now we have seen also human rights coming at almost every session of the Human Rights Council. So with that, I have already received some comments online, but I would like to start with the room. Is there anybody here who would like to announce something that is in preparation to this session of the Council, or has questions to our guests today? I'm looking at the room at my left, at my right. Otherwise, there was Connie online. So Connie, if you want to take the floor, feel free to unmute yourself, because you had some specific questions for Ben. So feel free to take the floor and ask the question. And we are going to see you here also in the room. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you, Dinah. Thank you, everybody. I'm Connie Martinez from Save the Children. And as you can imagine, we in the child rights community are very excited about the launch of the General Comment on Child Rights and Environment that will happen, as it was said, on the 18th of September. Very much looking forward to receiving the text, which is not public yet. And I just wanted to address a question to Ben about the panel on youth and climate change. And I was wondering if the fact that at this session, the launch of the General Comment, given that the launch on General Comment on Child Rights and Environment will happen at this session, if the panel on youth is open to children, and if the OHCHR would consider doing it, children and youth. And this is what we're trying to, as the child rights community, work towards. It worked really well, for example, in our discussions at the Aarhus Convention, where we very quickly became part of the youth network and working together. You know, children are not a static category. They tend to grow up and become youth. But at the same time, they do have specific vulnerabilities. You know, they don't have the right to vote. They have different needs and vulnerabilities than youth. But we are trying to really make these groups work together. So I was just wondering if there is any. I haven't seen the concept note. I saw that there was the panel is scheduled, and I was wondering if there's any room for children and also to participate and also to make reference to the general comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ben, should I take one more question before you answer? Or because I know that there is also Francesca online who wants to raise a question. Up to you. Yeah. How you want us to go ahead. Okay. So Francesca, I have moved you to the panel. So if you are ready to speak, just open your mic. There you are.
Good morning. Hi. Mine is not a question, it's more an announcement.
Introduce yourself because not everybody knows you.
Yeah, I'm Francesca Mingrone with the Center for International Environmental Law. I'm not sure whether this is the right moment. I wanted to announce a side event that we are planning to organize. I'm also happy to take the floor later if you're taking questions. Okay. Yes, we are planning to organize a side event on geoengineering and human rights. As many of you know, geoengineering refers to a set of large-scale technological interventions in the Earth's natural systems in order to address some of the effects of climate change. But they come with huge scientific uncertainties and risks to human rights. We are taking the occasion that the advisory committee of the Human Rights Council will present a report on new technologies intended for climate protection at this session. And so we're planning to organize a side event on the 18th of September, potentially. Of course, the day and time is going to be confirmed by the Secretariat, but really to look at what are the implications in terms of human rights of these technologies. Also having a discussion with one of the drafters of the report of the advisory committee and looking at other special procedures and international mechanisms that are addressing this issue. This is a follow-up from a previous side event that we organized at the 51st session of the Council last September. So really we want to continue the conversation on how human rights institutions can address and should address the issue of geoengineering. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesca. And yes, this is the time where you can also announce an event you are preparing. So now I will turn to Ben to answer Connie.
Thank you, Connie. So it's OHCHR's Child and Youth Rights Unit that will organize this panel discussion. But the resolution is specifically on youth and human rights. So it's HRC Resolution 51/17. The concept note, I imagine, will be made available sometime shortly after the informational session, according to our kind of standard process. It is not yet available. I think that we are, of course, conscious of the importance of creating spaces for children to participate and speak up. My understanding is that the panelists in this case are all youths. There's probably also some overlap in those later teenage years between what one might consider a child versus a youth. So they aren't completely distinct, I think. I'm not the expert on this, but if we were to do a Venn diagram, there would be a sort of mixed area as well, in my understanding. So I mean, really appreciate the question. I think the general comment from the CRC is certainly a valid subject of discussion as well. As I mentioned, there will be, of course, a specific launch event. That text is not yet available. Typically, they wait until it's translated into the official UN languages before they make it available. So I imagine that's the process right now. As you know, the comment itself was adopted now almost 2 months ago, and hopefully it will be available soon. And the standard for participating in the dialogues and discussions or the process is the same, right? So accredited entities to the council can request the floor, and they could certainly invite a child to speak on their behalf in doing so. So welcome, the question and a further conversation about that. I'm also happy to connect you with the colleagues that are organizing the panel discussion itself.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm starting again to look at who is in person here, if anyone wants to take the floor. Otherwise, I go back to online participants. Chile, do you want to take the floor, or is it fine with what we have presented? I think it's fine. Connie is happy with your answer, Ben. So I'm multitasking here, looking at the comments online. If I also want to turn to the panel. Is there anything you would like to add after hearing your colleagues speaking and who has taken the floor? No, I don't see any movement. So we are now very close to 11 a.m. So what I propose, so one thing very important to remember is that it's the link to the webpage where you will find a summary of all what has been presented here. And that same page, oh, Ben, yes. So Ben, please go ahead, and then I come back.
Sorry, Diana, to interrupt the conclusion there. Just really quickly, there were two things maybe I forgot to mention, which are also happening in September and relate to the work of the council. So the first is there will be Climate Ambition Summit, the Secretary General's Climate Ambition Summit, September 21st, if I'm remembering the date correctly, and there will be the Development Summit, 19 to 20 September. These are in New York at the margins of the General Assembly. It's really important, particularly when we have these processes happening at the same time, that we try to push for and ensure consistency across what's happening in the council and then in these different spaces. And it's a challenge sometimes to do that because, of course, we can't be in two places at once, but many of us work for organizations that can be in two places at once. So I encourage people to communicate about what's happening in the council to their colleagues and peers in New York. and also advance rights-based climate action there. And then the second one, similar point, the Council of Europe has an ongoing discussion on the feasibility of a new instrument on the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And the next discussion of this report that's being drafted on that subject is taking place September 24th to 28th, if I'm remembering the dates correctly. So there's a busy month ahead, and it's important to find those links so that we have policy coherence across these different processes.
The Climate Ambition Summit is on the 20th of September. Thank you, Ben, for reminding us those challenges, which actually happen every September. So with that, just wanted to bring to your attention the page where everything is summarized, and where you can also find the list of all the important events related to the environment that are taking place either at the council, either in the margins of the council. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the key statements will be summarized there. We also make links to the report summaries that are made by various institutions of the different events or sessions. So continue visiting the page because it's really regularly updated. And that's where you will find all the information, also detailed information on the Geneva tax-free tolls, which have their dedicated page on our website, and where we will as soon as the rooms are confirmed, add all the different sessions that Yves has listed to you. I would like to thank who has joined us online, who is here in the room with us, and who will later also watch this video to catch up on what's happening at this session of the Human Rights Council. So for who has joined us here, we can continue discussing bilaterally, and we are very happy to have you here with us. So once more, thank you very much, and we will now close the session. Thank you. And something important, because I see a slide here of our upcoming events. You see here on the screen 3 important upcoming events. 2 are taking place this week. The 2 of this week are briefings in preparation of environmental negotiations. The first one is and I put this bigger for who is looking at the screen, is a briefing on the Global Intergovernmental Meeting on Minerals and Metals that will take place in Geneva on the 7th and 8th of September. 7 is a day off for the Geneva people because it's the Jeune Genevois, but who is negotiating, will be negotiating at CCG. So this briefing will present you the major challenges of this intergovernmental meeting. And this is tomorrow. And after tomorrow, on Thursday, we will be discussing the preparations of an event that you have mentioned, a negotiation that you have mentioned, which is the 5th session of the International Conference on Chemicals and Management that is taking place in Bonn, Germany. Many member states will also follow the negotiations from Geneva, or have been following this negotiation from Geneva. And we'll have also various stakeholders' perspective on this negotiation, including the Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights himself joining that panel. And then next week we will be discussing water, and the Special Rapporteur on human rights, water and sanitation is also joining the panel of the event. It's an event organized in preparation of the World Water Forum, which will take place in Bali, and that event is taking place at Palais des Nations, which the 2 other briefings are taking place here in Building 2 of the Environment House. So this was my more than 1 minute of publicity. Thank you very much again for joining us, and looking forward to discussing bilaterally with you. And goodbye, everybody.